Hi, so thank you for sitting down with us today. So this interview is intended to just sort of look at at Georgetown's role on the global stage with all the new initiatives coming out.
Sure.
And so the university recently announced the Global Futures Initiative,
Yes.
and today's the first talk with the World Bank.
We launch it today.
Yes. So could you talk a little bit about the impetus for the Global Futures Initiative and
Sure.
how you see it propelling Georgetown forward?
Sure. So there are a number of different forces that came into play that enabled us to launch Global Futures. And let me give you a little bit of the background context and then some of the more immediate issues that emerged. So the background context is, I would say over the course of the years that I've served in this role, an emerging question when I first started, but one that within the first 4 or 5 years became a dominant question among institutions of higher learning in the United States and around the world, was what were the forces of globalization? What were they meaning? What was the impact of those forces on the trajectory of our institutions? Georgetown had always been international from our founding. In the 1790s, our course catalog was in 3 languages. A quarter of our students came from abroad. Always international, 140 countries represented in the student body. Half of our students study abroad. But what was this global stuff, and what did it demand of us? What did it mean? And we really began wrestling with that in 2005, 2006. Our board, our senior leadership, our faculty, we all kind of began working on this question. And we began making the way we described it is, we were always international. Global is something a little bit different. What is the difference between being international and being global? And how should the university respond within that context? And the way we went about it was by trying to identify a set of projects that were a little different than anything we had ever done before. The most significant was the decision to place the School of Foreign Service and Education City in Doha as part of what is, to this point, the most exciting project in global higher education in the world today. We're there with 7 institutions, including Cornell Medical School, Carnegie Mellon, Texas A&M, Northwestern School of Communications and Journalism. We had never done anything like that. Next week, I'll be in Doha to celebrate the 10th anniversary of this venture. And it's been fantastic for us. We've learned so much about what it means to be a university in the 21st century through that project. At the same time, our law center launched a project in London. It's called the Center for Transnational Legal Studies. And that center brings together 25 law schools, students and faculty from 25 law schools, as we try to wrestle with what are the implications of developing this new field of law. Those were some of our early ventures. And what we came to understand was there is something different about this moment. The world is connected in certain kinds of ways. And what we want to ensure is that we have access to, flow, and we contribute to the ideas, to the talent, and connect to the institutions that enable us to ensure that the kind of experience for our students and faculty is the most powerful it could possibly be. So now we come forward. We've done a few other things. We launched 2 master's degrees connected to international human development, one in the court school, one in the School of Foreign Service. We've launched a degree in global health. So I'd say about a year ago, I began a conversation with the president of the World Bank, Jim Kim. And Jim had expressed an interest in trying to connect the bank and Georgetown in ways where we might be able to engage some of the ideas that define this moment. The bank is wrestling with these ideas. Georgetown is wrestling with these ideas. How about if we try to weigh a way in which we might be able to do that together? And that converged with 2 other things that unfolded in the last roughly year. We established our first vice president for global engagement. And we asked Professor Thomas Banchoff, who had also helped us establish the Berkeley Center in the last decade. We asked Professor Banchoff if he would take on the role of being our first vice president for global engagement. And then second, we launched Designing the Futures, in which we began to explore what is this moment demand of us in terms of the very idea of the university. And as we began the conversations with President Kim and his colleagues at the bank, as Tom began wrestling with what this moment demands of us in terms of how we respond as a global university, and as we thought about the future in the context of designing the futures and what kinds of structures, programs, processes we might want to put in place that would enable us to respond ever more effectively, Tom proposed that we launch Global Futures, which is its own project, but it's designed to connect to the work that is going on in designing the futures and designed to help us respond in the most exciting ways to this moment, the question of what does it mean to be a global university.
So with these initiatives dedicated to that concept of the future, is there, in terms of the stuff filtering down to the student body, could you explain exactly the concrete results of these programs so far, especially Designing the Futures, which has been in place for a while?
Well, Designing the Futures we launched with a talk that I gave in mid-November of 2013. So in university terms, it's just getting underway. So I would say that thus far, it's brought a great deal of focus and attention to our work and trying to think through what kinds of structures, programs, what kinds of assumptions we make about ourselves should we be rethinking. At this point, we turned 226 years old last week. We added our first new school in 57 years last year. We move very, very carefully, very deliberately. And in thinking about the kinds of issues that are at stake in designing the futures, under the leadership of Randy Bass, our Vice Provost for Learning, our Provost Bob Groves, we're deeply engaged in trying to ensure that in the most careful and respectful and responsible way possible, we're asking the hardest questions of ourselves. And I think the kind of feedback we're getting, we've gotten a good deal of attention. Yesterday we had, in the series that we offered to our community, we had Dr. Mimi Ito from the University of California, Irvine, who's been a leader in connecting learning. She gave a talk, I interviewed her, we hosted a dinner in her honor last night. And she's been part of a series that have included President Teresa Sullivan of the University of Virginia, President Susan Hockfield, President Emeritus of MIT, Jonathan Cole, former Provost of Columbia, and Stephen Coslin, who is the Dean of the Minerva School, one of the great disruptors in our work. The combination of these are enabling us to ask really, really hard questions. Professor Bass has been offering a spring course the last couple of years, it's offered right now, on the future of the university as a design problem, engaging a number of students in that work. We took a townhouse last spring right on 37th Street. It happened to be painted red. We call it the Red House Project. It's a design studio. You go in there at any given time and you'll see students, faculty, embracing a set of issues, a wide-ranging set of issues that are asking the most fundamental questions about what we're doing. Now, Global Futures is designed to complement that, and it's designed to ensure that we're asking in an ever deeper way the kinds of questions that you would expect of a university that would want to ensure it was responding to these forces of globalization in a way that we're maximizing the opportunities for our students and faculty as we go forward.
So Global Futures is a global engagement project, but in terms of target, is it more for internal improvement or is it to improve Georgetown's brand recognition? Because I know that this year we had, I think, a record number, at least an increased number of international applicants. But if we look at our programs on the global stage, Georgetown still doesn't figure into the top rankings.
Yeah.
So
So a little bit about the rankings. So as you know, in the U.S. context, we get ranked always in the top 25. Global rankings, we don't do as well. The criteria used in the global rankings don't lend themselves to characterizing Georgetown very effectively. So we understand how they are making those global rankings, but we're not, no amount of work on brand recognition is going to change the criteria that are used for global rankings. And we're really not focused on trying to address that because it's a different kind of game than trying to ensure that we are most authentic to the institution who we are and who we're trying to be. There's our recognition globally, I think, exceeds our recognition nationally in terms of where students and families want to send their young people to be with. Other institutions continually want to engage with us in partnerships. We're honored to be a part of these, but we don't really view the global rankings as a metric by which we're going to establish our effectiveness as a global university. Last week, for example, I was at the World Economic Forum. I've been attending pretty much since I've been in this role. For the last 9 years, there's a group of us that have been meeting annually. The group is entitled the Global University Leaders Forum. There are about 8 to 10 of us from the United States, the most wonderful universities you could imagine, and then from other parts of the world, including Oxford and Cambridge, and 3 or 4 from Japan, a couple from China. And the group of us have been meeting now for nearly a decade. And we had our meetings last Thursday, focusing on a range of questions, how we can have an ever bigger impact in our local context in terms of supporting innovation and knowledge creation, creating more employment opportunities. In every part of the world, universities are some of the most valuable enterprises in terms of trying to facilitate the growth and development of a regional context. And so last week we spent some time together, and it's an honor for Georgetown to be included in that company, and it's been a great venue for us to work through some of these questions and challenges.
Sorry. And then, so you travel frequently. Could you estimate how many days a year you spend traveling, perhaps?
Well, this is a sore subject at our kitchen table at home. So, last week I was in Switzerland. So the way my year usually flows, in the fall, so much happens here on campus in the fall. I teach in the fall, but there are so many of the big events. If you think about the sort of signature events of a university, so many of ours take place in the fall. I'm thinking of Regula, for example, and that's stuff you just don't want to miss. So in the fall, I generally tend not to travel as much. I have the domestic work for the university, often in the form of our philanthropic work. But in the fall, I'm kind of home a lot. But usually in the last part of January, when I go over to Switzerland for the World Economic Forum meetings, that begins a pretty demanding travel schedule. So this year, next week, I'll be in Doha for the celebration of our 10th anniversary of being part of HBKU, an education city. A little bit later in the spring, I've been invited to China. I've been invited to the Summit of the Americas in Panama. I make a trip to Rome at the end of each academic year, and I'll have a trip to visit with our extended university community in the UK, and I'll do that May, June. So I would say, on average, I make about a dozen international trips a year, and those are they're pretty intense. I'm not away all that many days. There's a little bit of wear and tear in being able to manage all of that. But it's become more demanding. So in the fall, I actually did have 2 international trips that were relevant. I went to Rome at the end of September for a meeting of university leaders with the Congregation on Education. Fantastic experience. And then in mid-November, I went to Tokyo and received an honor from the Jesuit University in Tokyo and visited with our colleagues at Waseda University, so at Sophia, the Jesuit University, where we helped celebrate their 100th anniversary. I had the opportunity to address their community, and then at Waseda, a partner institution of ours on a number of projects, had a chance to visit with them and also with our alumni. Wherever I go, I get a chance to see the extended Georgetown community and then engage with partners of ours in developing the trajectory of the institution as we go forward.
And are there any areas of the world, in particular, that Georgetown is trying to target in terms of fostering engagement, and how would you figure it out?
Sure. Actually, we have really exciting projects going on in different parts of the world. So let me begin with Latin America, because there we have some really wonderful things that we've been engaged in. Every spring, we bring up 35 young social entrepreneurs who are at the very beginning of their careers. They range in age from about 25 to 35. They'll spend about 2 months with us, and then they go back and launch a new social enterprise, social entrepreneurship project. It's been under the leadership of one of our great faculty members, Ricardo Ernst, in our School of Business, but it's been sponsored by a group of alumni and friends called our Latin America Board, which provides us with ongoing attention in that region. And as I said, I've been invited in mid-April to go down for the Summit of the Americas. The President, Vice President of Panama, I had the opportunity to meet with them last week. And they're really excited about hosting the summit. They've asked if I would be a part of a pre-summit conference of education leaders. And we've been exploring very seriously how we might be able to use a platform that we would have in Panama in the future as a hub for work in the region. Similarly, we've been deeply involved over the last decade in China, deep partnerships that we've established with universities and with institutions that have enabled us to enhance the flow of ideas, talent, try to wrestle with the future of their country and the relations with ours. I've been invited to give a talk there in March, and trying to figure out if we can make all the pieces of this work out. But I think you'll see ever deeper engagement with our efforts to understand and engage with China. The Middle East has been we're probably as deeply engaged in that region as any university in the world. The presence of our campus in Doha is one piece of that puzzle, but we work with a really interesting project. I serve on the board. It's called the Jesuit Commons Higher Education at the Margins project, where we're delivering online education to refugees in different settings in the world. And last May, I had the opportunity to visit with that project in Jordan, where we're engaged in a number of really interesting projects in Jordan. So throughout the Middle East, we've had very deep work over the years, and we'll continue that. Europe and Eastern Europe, we've had great strength over the years there. And the area we're exploring right now in ever deeper ways is Africa. And we're really excited about some of the opportunities that may emerge for students there. I had a chance to meet with some of our alums over the last months who come from the region and live in the region. And we're just trying to find the right ways where we can be authentically ourselves and contribute in meaningful ways to the unfolding dynamics of these different parts of the world.
And then just sort of bringing it back to Georgetown, with this focus on global engagement, do you find that you still have the time to engage with students in a meaningful way?
Well, as you said, in the fall I teach, so I've been able to sustain my undergraduate seminar. I post on my Facebook page the things that I attend, and I think you'll see that it's a pretty substantial number of events. I try not to miss. I love it. I don't want to miss it. And my son is now 13. He's old enough to attend most of the things that our students do, not all of them. I usually call over for some of the theater productions and say, "Is it okay for my son?" And, "No, not this one." Just joking. But I love living here and being a part of this community. And I love going to the various matches, games, contests, shows, performances. I don't like to miss any of it. So whether it's the TED conference that we host, or whether it's the Rangila in November, whether it's the soccer tournament or the basketball team, or getting over on one of the nights to the women's games, watching M&B production, I love it. I can't do enough of it, and I don't like missing it. So I think I get the balance, but it's tough. The demands, I believe this community expects that I will embrace, engage, and pursue these global opportunities. It will enable the university to sustain the trajectory that it has over the course of its long history. But I will say this, And this has been the most powerful learning experience that I've had. The more we become global, the stronger we have to be right here. And so when you see all the construction cranes, and when you see the new housing that we're building, the Healy Family Student Center, if you see, when you look at the Royden B. Davis Performing Arts Center, Gonda Theater, Hariri Hall, Regents Hall, this was all of this is unfolded in the same time in which we've been wrestling with this question of globalization. And the deepest conviction I have is this: as we become more global, this place matters more and more. What I've learned globally is what people really want from us is a chance to connect with us and come and be a part of what we're doing here in meaningful ways. So this place, we've put more than $1 billion of capital infrastructure into this place in the last decade. And this is the deepest insight I've come away from the global stuff is, yes, we need to be out there. And we need to be out there in a way that recognizes that this place has to be ever stronger, ever better, ever more capable of providing the kind of lived community that we have here.
And you, Gasa, you recently started an initiative where you opened up your office for office hours.
Yes.
And so
Yeah.
how many iterations of those sessions have you had?
We had 2 in the fall, we have 2 here, 2 scheduled in the spring.
And who have you spoken through to those?
Those who came forward, student leaders, some who just had, just signed up and wanted to ask certain kinds of questions about
And
the affairs of the day.
Did you learn anything about the community that you weren't aware of? Or any issues that students had that you didn't know?
Yeah, it's helpful. I think I was able to get a nuance, a perspective, and a depth that I might not have had by my normal flow of information. So I found it really valuable. That's why we're going to do it again this spring. We didn't know there was an interest when the student leadership of Augusta came forward and said, would you be willing to consider this? We said, sure. We tried it. I really enjoyed it. So we're going to try it again this spring.
Okay. And you've now been the longest serving president at Georgetown for 13 years. And with all these long-term initiatives, are you considering your own future at Georgetown as well in these standings, or are you?
Well, the expectation, I serve at the will of our board, and the expectation that has been given to me by our board is that they would like me to continue for a while. So I'm going to continue to do the best I can for as long as it makes sense.
And also, how do you reconcile these long-term initiatives with the current short-term priorities?
Yeah, well, that's always the biggest challenge. I mean, we begin every year with 2 or 3 non-negotiable goals. We want to sustain our need-blind, full-need financial aid policy. That's enabled us to be the university that we are. We're in our 37th year of this policy, and there are only 25 institutions in the country that are able to sustain this policy. We're fortunate to be one of them. We start the year with that as our priority. The second priority we have is to ensure that we can sustain competitiveness for our faculty in terms of compensation. We want to ensure that the very best students are here, need-based, full need. We want to ensure that the very best faculty are here. We're competing with the greatest universities in the world for our faculty. The way in which we try to ensure that is first by trying to provide the most competitive compensation that we can. And then third is trying to ensure we're providing the infrastructure. And so the $1 billion worth of work we've done over the last decade is evidence of our trying to provide the best context for the faculty to be able to engage in that work with our students. And those 3 priorities, I don't get to go to Switzerland. I don't get to go to China if we're not attending to the most fundamental issues here. But if we're attending to those fundamental issues, then we get to wrestle with the more demanding or the more strategic questions beyond the immediate. And the challenge of leadership is to ensure we're attending to all those fundamental day-to-day operational questions. And giving us enough time so that we can attend to the strategic questions. And the answer, honestly, about the international travel, there's no amount of time I could give to it that would be enough. I mean, the number of requests, invitations, and it's all an honor. When it comes from our own community, it's with the very best of intention, but we can only, it's maintaining a balance between right here, right now, and ensuring that we're making decisions now that will position us for the right here and the right now in the future. And that's the balancing act for anybody in the role of leadership. And it's the hardest challenge that I wrestle with.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's a
for your time.
pleasure. It's a pleasure.